Japan built some of the most capable small four-wheel drives ever made. Then America decided you couldn't have them. Not because they failed, not because they were dangerous, because the people writing the import rules had a very specific idea of what the American driver should be allowed to buy, and these vehicles didn't fit the picture. Some were stopped by emissions rules. Some were killed by crash test requirements that would have cost more to satisfy than the vehicles were worth. Some were blocked by a 25% tariff that made the economics impossible. And one was driven out by a media campaign whose findings the government's own safety agency publicly questioned. 10 Japanese mini four-wheel drives. 10 different ways America decided you couldn't have them. The rest of the world has been driving them for decades without you. Number 10. Daihatsu Hijet. There is a machine that has been in continuous production since 1960 and has spent that entire time doing jobs that most full-size trucks decline to attempt. It fits through farm gates that stop a normal pickup cold. It carries payload across terrain that would bury larger vehicles axle deep in the first 100 meters. It has served as a farmer's workhorse, a forestry tool, a disaster relief vehicle, and a mountain logging companion across multiple continents without fundamentally changing what it is. That machine is the Daihatsu Hijet four-wheel drive, and America has never permitted a buyer to purchase one new from a dealer. The four-wheel drive variant brought a selectable transfer system, a low-range option on higher specifications, and a drivetrain that delivered sustained pulling power beyond what the displacement suggested. A 660 cubic centimeters three-cylinder engine, modest by any standard, but geared to perform consistently above its numbers under load. Japanese agricultural operators ran these trucks through muddy paddies and steep hillside orchards across decades without the ongoing maintenance that would make it impractical in a working environment. What made the Hijet genuinely capable was not power, but mechanical honesty. The drivetrain was engineered for sustained daily use, under load across years of operation, not occasional weekend excursions on a groomed trail. That durability is not a marketing claim. It is a product of 60-plus years of continuous production across markets that would expose inadequate engineering quickly. Environments that demand reliability as a condition of operation, not a feature to advertise. The regulatory barriers are dual. K-trucks do not meet federal motor vehicle safety standards, as built. The restraint systems, crash structure, and lighting do not align with NHTSA requirements. Daihatsu has never pursued compliance for a market where the commercial volume cannot justify the investment. The 25% chicken tax on light truck imports compounds the problem by making the economics of federalizing a vehicle at this price point essentially impossible. Compliance costs plus tariff exceed what the market will pay. Number 9. Honda Acty. Honda produced the Acty for 44 consecutive years, entering production in 1977 and discontinuing it in 2021, making it one of the longest-running single nameplate commercial vehicles in the company's history. The four-wheel drive variant was sold across Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe throughout that run. Not once during those 4 decades did an American buyer have a legal path to purchase a new example through official distribution. 44 years of continuous manufacturing, and the United States received none of it. What separated the Acty from its key truck competitors was a deliberate engineering decision about where to place the engine. Honda chose a midship rear configuration, positioning the power plant behind the cab and ahead of the rear axle. This was not a packaging compromise. The placement improved rear axle traction by concentrating mass over the driven wheels, kept the cab floor completely flat by eliminating the transmission tunnel, and produced a weight distribution that made the loaded Acty more stable than rivals with conventional architecture. The four-wheel drive system used a viscous coupling unit that transferred power to the front axle under rear wheel slip, with a manual lock for conditions requiring consistent front engagement. Combined with the rear weight bias of the mid-engine layout, the Acty four-wheel drive could climb grades and cross wet surfaces that comparable machines struggled to manage. It was not engineered as a trail truck. It performed like one anyway, and operators in demanding environments noticed. Honda ended Acty production in 2021, citing shifts in Japan's agricultural sector and declining domestic demand. The 25-year import rule has since made earlier generations eligible for American personal import. The machines that were refused entry as new commercial products are arriving as classics, which reveals something about the logic of the original barrier. A vehicle refused entry for 4 decades based on compliance costs is now welcome, once it is old enough to be exempt from the standards it could not meet. The Acty's 44-year run is evidence that stands without commentary. Honda does not maintain a commercial vehicle in production for 4 decades out of habit. The fundamental architecture was sound enough to justify sustained refinement across multiple generations. Agricultural and light commercial operators in markets that take durability seriously return to it, generation after generation. America never participated in that relationship through any official channel. Mid-engine layout in a K truck. Honda did it for 44 years. What were they trying to prove that the competition was not? Number 8. Daihatsu Feroza. The Daihatsu Feroza arrived in 1989 with a specification that the compact four-wheel drive market had not previously offered at its price point. A 2-door short wheelbase body on a genuine ladder frame chassis, solid axle suspension, a part-time four-wheel drive system with a low-range transfer case, and approach angles that made the short wheelbase a genuine off-road advantage. Sold as the Rocky in some regions, the Sportrack in the UK, and the Feroza across Asia and the Middle East. In the United States, it carried no name because it never arrived. The mechanical specification was legitimate. A 1.6-litre inline-4 producing approximately 95 horsepower drove through a drivetrain prioritizing low-speed torque over top-end output. The short wheelbase reduced susceptibility to high centering on uneven ground, one of the most significant off-road metrics that longer wheelbase competitors sacrifice. Earlier configurations used solid axles front and rear, providing articulation that wheels to follow terrain independently, not a crossover with off-road branding. Built to a specific purpose. Daihatsu positioned it as a budget-accessible alternative to the Toyota Land Cruiser and Suzuki Jimny in markets that needed genuine capability without a premium price. The formula worked. Europe received it through the Sportrack nameplate, and the vehicle developed a genuine following. Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Australasia ran Ferozas in conditions that expose inadequate engineering quickly. The decade-long production record across those markets provides validation that no marketing budget can substitute for. The absence from America traced directly to Daihatsu's withdrawal from the US passenger car market in 1992, after a commercially marginal attempt to establish distribution. The infrastructure required to federalize a niche four-wheel drive, NHTSA crash testing, EPA compliance, spare parts distribution, dealer network, did not exist after that withdrawal. The business case for rebuilding it around a low-volume compact four-wheel drive was impossible to construct at any realistic sales projection. Production ended in 1999 without a direct replacement. Daihatsu moved in a different direction, and the Feroza's specific combination of ladder frame construction, short wheelbase geometry, and accessible pricing was not carried forward. What remains is a 10-year production record of a vehicle that proved compact. Four-wheel drives could be built to genuine off-road standards without requiring premium pricing. America observed none of that decade from the inside. Ladder frame, low range, solid axles, under 4 meters. What would the Feroza have retailed for in America in 1993? Number 7. Isuzu Trooper short wheelbase. American buyers know the Isuzu Trooper, but what they know is an edited version. The long wheelbase 5-door wagon that reached American dealerships was one specific configuration of a vehicle family that launched in a fundamentally different form. The short wheelbase 2-door Trooper that debuted in 1981, the one that defined the nameplate's original engineering intention, never crossed to the American market. Isuzu exported the accessible version. The capable one stayed closer to home. The short wheelbase configuration sharpened every off-road metric that matters. The reduced wheelbase lowered the risk of high centering on undulating ground. The 2-door body was lighter, improving the power-to-weight ratio of a modest drivetrain. Approach and departure angles increased in direct proportion to what the shortened platform removed from the overhangs. These are not marginal improvements. They change what a vehicle can attempt on technical terrain. The diesel engine option available in Japanese domestic market specification transformed the Trooper's character entirely. A 2.2-liter diesel unit producing torque figures that the petrol equivalent could not approach was calibrated for exactly the kind of low-speed, sustained load work that four-wheel drive terrain demands. Petrol engines produced their output higher in the rev range and require more driver management on technical ground. The diesel Trooper short wheelbase was a different vehicle in practical use, and American buyers had no access to it in either specification. Isuzu's American distribution focused on the long wheelbase configuration because that version had broader appeal in a market that prioritized interior space and highway comfort. American buyers who wanted a compact Isuzu four-wheel drive were directed toward the larger model. The short wheelbase diesel variant that competed seriously in the genuine terrain segment was never part of the American conversation. The first generation ended in 1991 when the second generation replaced the entire Trooper line. By that point, the original short wheelbase diesel had accumulated a decade of validation across demanding markets. Australia ran them through outback conditions. The Middle East used them across terrain that requires genuine engineering to traverse safely. The vehicle's record in those environments is the kind of evidence that endures after production ends. America received the station wagon version. The capable one went to people who actually needed it. Isuzu gave America the long, comfortable version and sent the short, capable diesel version everywhere else. Smart business decision, or did they underestimate the American off-road market? Number 6. Mitsubishi Pajero Mini. Mitsubishi built the Pajero into one of the most credible off-road nameplates in the world through Dakar rally victories and a documented reputation for crossing terrain that stopped less capable machines. Then they took that engineering lineage, compressed it into a K-class body under 3.4 meters, fitted it with a turbocharged 660cc engine, and sold it to Japanese domestic buyers for 18 consecutive years. The Pajero Mini ran from 1994 to 2012. In that entire span, no American buyer had access to a new example through official channels. The Super Select four-wheel drive system, fitted to higher specifications, was not included as a nameplate decoration. It was a genuine four-mode transfer system, two-wheel drive for road use, full-time four-wheel drive for mixed surfaces, part-time with low range for serious terrain, and a rear differential lock for when individual wheel traction management is insufficient. Mitsubishi carried real engineering downward from the full-size Pajero, rather than substituting a simpler system. The turbocharged engine approached the Japanese domestic market's self-imposed 64 horsepower ceiling, with torque delivery calibrated for low-speed utility. The combination of forced induction and the key platform's tight weight budget produced a vehicle that felt genuinely capable at low range, rather than merely adequate. The short wheelbase and compact dimensions gave the Pajero Mini access to terrain corridors the full-size model could not enter, making it a genuine complement to the larger vehicle rather than simply a smaller replica. The regulatory situation was straightforward. K vehicles are manufactured to Japanese domestic specifications that do not align with NHTSA safety standards as written. Mitsubishi had no commercial incentive to fund certification for a low-volume product in a market where the Montero was already occupying dealer space and brand attention. The Pajero Mini was conceived as a Japanese domestic product, and export markets for K-class vehicles faced the same regulatory walls that kept it out of America. Production ended in 2012 without a successor. The Pajero Mini's 18-year run represents the complete extent of what that specific engineering combination achieved. American buyers who wanted the Pajero name received the Montero in progressively larger configurations. The version with the differential lock, the turbocharged K engine, and the short wheelbase trail geometry remained in Japan for 18 years and ended without ever crossing to the market that might have appreciated it most. The Pajero name meant Dakar wins and genuine terrain credibility. Would you have bought the Mini version if Mitsubishi had offered it at a US dealership? Number 5. Daihatsu Taft and Rugger. Before Suzuki had found the formula it would run with globally, Daihatsu produced a vehicle that established the template most of what followed was built from. The Taft arrived in 1974 as a purpose-built compact four-wheel drive with a ladder frame chassis, solid axles front and rear, and a diesel engine option that gave it genuine commercial utility. It was raw in the way purposeful vehicles tend to be. America never imported it. The engineering philosophy was transparency carried to its conclusion. The drivetrain was a conventional part-time setup with a 2-speed transfer case, simple enough that any competent mechanic could service it without specialist equipment or imported parts. Solid axles front and rear prioritized articulation and durability over road comfort. The body was upright and utilitarian, maximizing interior volume within compact dimensions. Every choice reflected a clear understanding of what the vehicle needed to do and what buyers in working environments required from it. The diesel option fundamentally changed what the Taft could accomplish in practical use. Diesel architecture delivers torque flat across a wide rev range, exactly what low-range four-wheel drive terrain demands. The fuel economy advantage under sustained load was significant in markets where operating cost mattered more than purchase price. Mechanical resilience in environments where petrol quality was variable and breakdown recovery was distant made diesel the right choice for serious users. American consumers of this period had the FJ40, the International Scout, and the early Bronco available for compact four-wheel drive requirements. Daihatsu's American presence was limited to economy cars and did not extend to utility vehicles, which meant the Taft was never evaluated for the US market, even in periods when it would have competed directly. The distribution infrastructure for a Daihatsu utility vehicle simply did not exist in America during the years the Taft was in production. The Taft evolved into the Rugger and the broader Rocky family, and those descendants reached some export markets in limited form. But the foundational vehicle, the 1974 original that established what a Japanese compact four-wheel drive could be, never entered America. Every vehicle on this list traces some portion of its engineering, DNA, back to decisions Daihatsu made in that first Taft. America participated in the descendants at a remove, years later, in diluted form. The original never arrived. The vehicle that started Japan's compact four-wheel drive era, and America missed the original entirely. Does knowing that change how you see everything that came after it? Number 4. Suzuki Jimny, JB64. The Suzuki Jimny JB64 is the Japanese domestic market designation for the 4th generation Jimny, right-hand drive, built to domestic specification. The engineering: a ladder frame chassis, 3-link rigid axle suspension at both ends, a part-time four-wheel drive transfer case with low range, and a 1.5-liter engine producing approximately 100 horsepower. Available in 46 countries. The United States is not among them, The most capable small four-wheel drive currently in production is banned from American roads. The regulatory situation is straightforward. The current Jimny does not meet NHTSA crash test standards as configured. Suzuki has not pursued American certification, and without an existing US dealer network, Suzuki withdrew from the American passenger car market in 2012. The investment required to establish certification, distribution, and after-sales support cannot be justified. The Jimny exists in a state of high global availability and complete American commercial absence simultaneously, and neither condition appears likely to change. The context that sharpens the absence is the American off-road market the Jimny cannot enter. American buyers spend $60,000 to $80,000 on domestic off-road truck packages, large, heavy, calibrated for highway comfort as much as terrain. The Jimny, at a fraction of those prices, outperforms them on tight technical terrain through compact dimensions, short wheelbase, and rigid axle articulation. The machine that genuinely competes in that terrain role is the one banned from the same market. The waiting list that developed in Japan following the 2018 launch extended beyond 2 years for new orders at various points. A vehicle in production shortage in its home market, available across 46 countries spanning every major region, generates that level of demand, while being entirely absent from the world's largest automotive market. The mismatch is not subtle. It reflects a regulatory and commercial environment in America that has no standard mechanism for a vehicle of this type to enter through normal channels. The 25-year rule will eventually make early fourth-generation Jimnys eligible for American personal import. That process will be individually expensive and limited in scale compared to normal distribution. Until then, the JB64 sits in a peculiar position, simultaneously one of the most wanted four-wheel drives in the world, and one that an entire major market is structurally excluded from purchasing new. The demand accumulating in America will become visible when the barrier eventually drops. 46 countries get the Jimny. America does not. At what price would you import one right now if the compliance paperwork were handled for you? Number 3. Mitsubishi Pajero Evolution. Mitsubishi built the Pajero Evolution for a single reason. The FIA required a minimum run of 2,500 road-legal units to homologate a vehicle for Dakar's production class. The result was approximately 2,500 examples of one of the most technically extreme homologation specials ever produced in the compact four-wheel drive category. 0 were offered to American buyers. Not one crossed the Pacific through any authorized channel. The specification departed from anything else Mitsubishi sold with a Pajero badge in this period. Extended fender flares, a functional hood scoop, revised aerodynamic surfaces, few panels shared with the standard Pajero. Underneath, a 3.5-litre V6 producing 276 horsepower drove through a four-wheel drive system with limited slip differentials at both axles. Fully independent suspension with long travel dampers, tuned for high-speed terrain crossing. Not the standard Pajero with modifications. A purpose-built machine that happened to be road legal. The four-wheel drive calibration was distinct from the standard Pajero's active track system. Mitsubishi's engineers retuned the entire driveline around a vehicle designed to cross the Sahara at competitive pace. The limited slip differentials were set up to manage the V6's output under conditions where standard open differentials would lose traction entirely. The result was a vehicle that behaved like competition machinery, while remaining technically road legal in markets that received it. The commercial logic of American absence was straightforward. Approximately 2,500 units built globally, with the Japanese domestic market absorbing a significant proportion, left a limited remainder for other markets. Federalizing the vehicle for American sale would have required NHTSA crash testing, EPA compliance, spare parts distribution, and dealer support infrastructure. The production run was too small and too short to make any of those investments commercially rational. Mitsubishi built exactly as many as the FIA required and stopped. The Pajero Evolution won at Dakar. The road car that made those competition entries eligible exists in a specific, finite number. Approximately 2,500 examples distributed across markets that did not include the United States. Collector values have moved accordingly. What Mitsubishi created as a regulatory compliance minimum has become one of the most significant and collectible, compact four-wheel drives ever produced. America had no relationship with it during its production life, and no official pathway to access it now. Built to meet a minimum. Approximately 2,500 made, one at Dakar, never sold in America. What does one go for at auction today? Drop your number. Number 2. Mitsubishi Delica. There is no vehicle in the global four-wheel drive market that occupies the same position as the Mitsubishi Delica. A genuine van, 7 or 8 seats, full standing headroom, proper cargo volume, built on a platform with a four-wheel drive system, low-range transfer case, and underpinnings sharing lineage with the Pajero. It answers a question no other manufacturer thought viable. What if a family van could access terrain that purpose-built four-wheel drives struggle with? America has been locked out of that answer for over 40 years. The Delica's four-wheel drive evolution reached its most celebrated form with the Star Wagon generation of the 1980s and early 1990s. High roof body, midship engine layout, genuine low-range four-wheel drive, and clearance figures that allowed terrain conventional vans cannot consider. It developed a global overlanding, following no advertising could manufacture. Successive generations refined the formula, and the current generation continues today, still unavailable in the United States. The reason for non-availability has been consistent across all generations. No comparable segment exists in America. The American minivan buyer wants road comfort and suburban utility. The American four-wheel drive buyer wants a truck platform with visible toughness. The Delica sits between and above both, not a category that American dealerships have a sales process for. Mitsubishi has never pursued American certification for any Delica generation. The global overlanding community built the Delica's reputation without American market participation. Australian buyers documented what happens when a Delica is taken seriously across the outback. New Zealand adventurers proved its capacity in terrain that demands genuine engineering. Canadian buyers, under different import regulations, demonstrated the demand that exists when the barrier is partially lowered. The record is consistent. A vehicle this size has no engineering right to perform the way the Delica performs off-road. The 25-year rule has made Star Wagon generation examples eligible for American import, and the response from the domestic enthusiast market has been immediate. Used examples now command prices reflecting decades of accumulated demand from a market excluded from purchasing them new. The Delica arrived in America through the age exemption pathway, the back door of regulatory timing, rather than the front door of manufacturer commitment. A peculiar way for one of the world's most distinctive four-wheel drive vehicles to finally reach its audience. A full family van that crosses rivers. America got the Chrysler Voyager instead. Whose decision was worse, Mitsubishi for not pursuing certification, or the regulators for making it impossible? Number 1. Suzuki Samurai SJ4 13. The Suzuki Samurai is the only vehicle on this list that Americans were permitted to buy, then had methodically removed from the market through flawed journalism and a consumer advocacy campaign built on disputed testing. The Japanese domestic market diesel variants and the post-withdrawal generations the rest of the world continued to receive never arrived at all. The reason the Samurai sits at number 1 is what the removal of one generation did to American access to everything the platform became afterward. The Samurai entered America in late 1985 for the 1986 model year and found buyers immediately. Affordable, with a genuine four-wheel drive system, and low range in a package smaller than anything domestic manufacturers offered in the segment. Then Consumer Reports published a 1988 evaluation, characterizing it as having an unacceptable tendency to roll over. Sales collapsed. Suzuki withdrew rather than defend it in a market where the controversy had made continued distribution untenable. Suzuki filed a product disparagement lawsuit in 1996. A 2004 settlement dismissed the case with no money changing hands. Consumer Reports did not retract its findings. Both sides confirmed they still disagreed on the validity of the testing. What the settlement produced was a clarification. CU acknowledged the rollover claim applied to the severe test maneuver specifically, not routine driving. The vehicle was long gone from the American market before that nuance entered the public record. What disappeared with the American exit was not only the Samurai, as it existed in 1988. American buyers lost access to the platform's continued development. Japanese domestic market diesel variants changed what the short-wheelbase platform could accomplish at low speed. Later drivetrain refinements addressed reliability concerns early American models had occasionally shown. None of that reached US buyers through any official pathway. Viewers of this channel's existing content contributed first-hand accounts, placing the Samurai in context that American media never reached. Caribbean military exercises involving joint United States operations produced documented instances of the Samurai outperforming the Humvee in specific four-wheel drive terrain assessments. A vehicle consumer advocacy helped remove from the American market was, in concurrent operational environments, demonstrably exceeding American military equipment in the precise terrain role it was designed for. The Samurai did not fail the test that mattered. Consumer Reports called it dangerous in 1988. A court found the methodology flawed in 2004. Military exercises showed it outperforming the Humvee off-road. Which verdict do you trust? 10 Japanese mini four-wheel drives, 10 different mechanisms keeping them out of America. One pattern running through every entry. The engineering was never the issue. The Hijet is still in production. The Jimny is still on a waiting list in Japan. The Delica is still crossing rivers in countries that had the sense to let it in. The Samurai's reputation was restored 16 years after the report that ended its American life. The machines held up. The process around them did not. One question before you go. If the ban lifted tomorrow on a single vehicle from this list, which one crosses first? Drop the name in the comments. And subscribe if you want the next one.